Hello folks, this is Chris in central Pennsylvania, in the heart of farmland on a beautiful spring day, almost summer here in central Pennsylvania. And it's time to talk about something that people simply refuse to address, and that's the lies in South Africa. So the reality is the following. You can't trust government and government statistics. What am I talking about? Farm attacks and farm murders. Why can't we trust them? Well, for instance, over a decade ago, the South African government, embarrassed by the level of violent crime in South Africa, simply refused to report crime statistics for what? Almost 3 years. They just refused to report it. So no one had the information, nothing to go off of. And now we know it's not simply an effort of mistake or error by local constables, but a clear effort to cover up the violent crime and to deny what's happening on farms, the intentional targeted domestic terrorism that's taking place in South Africa. I can point to a recent farm attack in which I actually know the victims, family, who were assaulted. And this is a planned, coordinated, obvious attempt to frighten people off the land. Now, what often happens is that a few items are taken when people aren't murdered. A few items are taken so that it can be hidden as a house robbery. And that's what happened in this case in a farm near Brits, just outside Pretoria, to the northwest of Pretoria. On Tuesday this past week, an elderly couple, their dogs were poisoned one night, so they had no advance warning, the dogs to warn them that someone was on the property. Then the tires were stolen from their bakkie in an unusual situation so that they couldn't get away. And the gentleman, who was wheelchair bound after a recent hip operation, and his wife, at 2 a.m. their home was broken into by 5 armed thugs who spoke fluent Setswana. So don't tell me these are Mozambicans or Lesotho or anyone else. These were South African thugs who intentionally attacked this farm and attacked this couple. Now, it wasn't a simple attack, but this crime, as you can see from those police report, has falsely been reported as a house robbery. That's just a cover-up by the part of people intentionally seeking to intimidate or terrorize those living on farms in South Africa to chase them off the farms. So what happened? And what other charges should be filed? How should this event be described? It should be described as a farm attack. They were tied up, restrained, and then beaten severely, savagely, with an antique iron, something that weighs at least 4 to 5 times what this large rock weighs. These elderly white South African farmers were tied up by 5 armed thugs, elderly. And then these cowards beat them savagely with an antique iron that weighs 4 to 5 times what this huge heavy rock weighs. Beat them savagely about the face, stomped on the elderly gentleman's hands in an effort to break his hands or cripple him. To what end? This isn't a house robbery. At a minimum, it's aggravated assault. At its worst, it's attempted murder. It's a home invasion. It's trespassing. It's aggravated assault. It's attempted murder, perhaps. It's not a house robbery. What a crock of nonsense. South African government hides these attacks and then denies that they take place and lies about it. We saw the Minister of Police, Senzo Mkhunu, recently claiming that this is nonsense. There's no such thing. White farmers are not being targeted. We have only one farm murder or one farm attack, and most of them are black South Africans. Well, those are pure lies. And we know they're lies because they simply cover up the violent crimes directed against South Africa's farmers by falsely claiming they're house robberies. They're not house robberies. It's domestic terrorism meant to terrorize and frighten people off the land. And do you know why they do it? Because it works. Because it works. They frighten people off the land. This is a war. This is a war being committed by syndicates and a cover-up by the South African government. What else would you cover it? Call it. What would you call it? When they hide the statistics about a farm attack and then deny there are no farm attacks, when they don't even have a category for farm attacks or farm murders. And they refuse to make it a priority crime. 68,000 commercial white farmers in 1994. Today, 28 to 32,000. Yes, I know some young people don't want to work on farms. They've left the farms. Other farms have been sold. Yes, I know that. But roughly 4,000 white farmers and their family members have been attacked, assaulted, raped, bludgeoned, dismembered, and or murdered on those farms. Well, and murdered, at least close to 4,000. Yet it's not a priority crime. 4,000 out of 68,000, that's a pretty high statistic. But many of these have occurred in the last 10, 15 years. So if you take the number starting a much lower figure of around 40,000 farmers down to less than 30,000, and 4,000 is closer to 12% of the farmers and their family members have been murdered. And that's not a priority crime for South Africa's government? If it was a house robbery, why was the elderly man restrained, tied up, and then beaten savagely, as was his wife? If it's just house robbery, why are people raped in the process of it? Why are babies murdered? It's not house robbery. It's domestic terrorism, plain and simple. And it's a cover-up by the government. And it's shameful. One can only draw one conclusion from it. And that's that this is intentional, it's willful, and it is the objective of someone to chase South Africa's farmers off their land, which they've acquired legally and have title to, or have borrowed money from a bank to buy the land. This isn't happenstance. This isn't regular crime. South Africa doesn't have a crime problem. Well, it does, but not when it comes to farm attacks. When it comes to farm attacks, South Africa has a domestic terrorist problem, which the government refused to acknowledge. Will the world notice? Will the world pay attention? I wouldn't hold my breath, folks. These people are on their own, isolated. And we haven't even mentioned the fact that most crimes in South Africa go unreported. Why? Because the police don't respond, they don't have a vehicle, or they don't care, or they don't come. And then they report a man being savagely beaten and his wife being savagely beaten as a house robbery. Why would you call the police? They obviously don't give a flying flip about South Africans. What say you, South Africa? What say you, world? Cheers.